I do really love folk horror movies. Like it can be such a great subgenre as it's able to mix culture, religion, or ancestry into a tale of horror and excitement. Taking some of these old stories and infusing them with a horror spin can definitely be a lot of fun. The Golem is a 2018 horror movie about a woman who raises a golem to protect a small village in Lithuania. This movie, there's just no way to get around this. This movie was a bit of a letdown for me. Now, with most movies, I try to go in as cold as possible so that I can experience everything as fresh as I can. But the limited amount of info that I saw about this movie really intrigued me. Like the story concept was interesting, the look of it was certainly quality, and it seemed to be a subject that I hadn't really seen much from in general. The movie itself centers on Hannah, who lives in a small Jewish village in Lithuania in the 17th century. Now, her and her husband had experienced a tragedy 7 years prior when their son had died unexpectedly. I don't know if they get into exactly how he died, but it seems like he drowned of some sort. Hannah has been sneaking into the village's temple and secretly learning about the Kabbalah, as it is normally off limits to women. And she is clearly the best student of the subject, despite having to learn from under the floorboards, when we see that she's able to answer whatever questions sort of the rabbi is posing to the group, which the group cannot.
Can anyone name the elements that combine the Star of David?
Ruach,
Ruach,
Neshama,
Neshama,
Chaya,
Chaya,
Yechida.
Chidah.
Anyway, when her and her friend come across a plague-ridden village next door of Gentiles, it exposes their home to a group of evil men who blame this Jewish community for the plague as a reason for terrorizing it. Now, this sends a desperate Hannah off to steal that Kabbalah and venture into the more off-limits recesses of the book to summon a monster to help them save their village. Now, the main issue for me here is the story feels like a little bit of a bait and switch. I hate kind of saying that because the story is whatever the story is, and what the marketing of the story shouldn't really factor into what the actual story is, but it's hard to avoid it in this scenario given the cold open of a monster killing a bunch of people. So even sort of putting aside the marketing versus the actual movie, even the cold open kind of sets you on a path that I don't think it actually delivers on. Now, the premise itself is pretty interesting. There are some really good character moments and some things that work, but it also kind of gets lost through most of the movie and doesn't really generate the level of stakes necessary to sell this premise. Now, essentially, the evil men that we're talking about, they ride into town with the daughter of their leader, claiming that the reason that this Jewish community isn't stricken with the same plague that they are is because they must have either caused it or they possess some magic that makes them immune to it. Either way, the evil leader says that either they heal his daughter or they'll burn the village to the ground. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a great motivation to kick off this plot. And it really is. The initial threat here is enough to propel Hannah into stealing the Kabbalah and researching how to raise this golem, which is a creature made of the earth and designed to do the bidding of the one who raises it. But what's lacking here is the escalating threat level to keep the pressure on in order to force Hannah into making these decisions. Now, aside from a few men from the nearby village, the threat that they offer is pretty subdued. Like, from my eyes, it looks like it's 5 guys against an entire town. What I really wanted to see, or feel like what I needed to see, is a suffocating presence in this town. Now, I know we're talking about totally different budgets here, but I think of the scene in Braveheart where William Wallace's new wife, Marin, is attacked by an English soldier and he retaliates on. Like, that town felt to me like it was under occupation of an English force. The oppressiveness was there. And there wasn't like an entire army. It wasn't like they showed the army everywhere. It was just a few well-placed men with the air of confidence and power. In this movie, it just kind of feels like a couple guys threatening an entire village. Like, okay, The other way to go with this is if we're talking about more of like a Magnificent Seven kind of thing, where a gang rides into town and then puts fear into the town in order to force the town into making a tough choice. If you're doing it that way, they need to really put the fear into the town. Make some big choices. Like really get across that they're not to be messed with. Instead, here we get a lot of threats, but that's kind of it. Like one person ends up getting shot, but we're never really led down this path of kind of escalating danger that I thought should have been more important. But aside from that, Hannah does in fact go out and perform the ritual and create the golem, which for some reason comes to her in the shape of a 7-year-old boy. Like, I don't quite understand why that was specifically. I mean, in the opening scene, they raise the golem, but it's a giant monster, so I don't know why in this moment it's a boy. I guess maybe it taps into her subconscious because of her dead child. I don't really know. They didn't really say it, and I'm not sure. Once again, though, this is an intriguing concept, and it does tap into the loss of her own child at a similar age. This kind of kicks off a relationship between her and the golem shaped like a boy. And it becomes sort of the central focus of the movie. And as she spends more and more time with this creature, she becomes more attached to it, with good reason, and begins to question whether she will be able to send it away after the task that she summoned it for is done. Now, all of this is great stuff, but it starts to stray too far away, in my opinion, from the central plot for far too long. Also, in a bit of a confusing turn of events, the golem seems to develop an attachment to Hannah and even become somewhat jealous of the time that she spends with others and kind of reacting to her inner desires. I mean, this element of the story ends up taking center stage for most of the movie, and it ends up going all in on the relationship of the woman, the golem, her dead son, and her husband's infidelity. Like, I can understand that relationship, and I always appreciate character development, but none of that is compelling enough to prop up the whole film. If this movie was simply about her raising a golem and then having this attachment to it because it looks like her son, and that was the central focus of the film, that would be fine and a compelling set of events. But in this, we're setting this up as the main focus is this threat to the village. There's also a story here as a monkey paw scenario, where be careful what you meddle in as it can have unexpected consequences, which this kind of showcases in the cold open with the golem that the man raises turns against him. But this never really goes in that direction either, which, by the way, the jealousy of the golem just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, why is it acting like a child's jealousy? Like, I know it has the form of a child, but this is a creature that's been around for centuries. In all other aspects, it has no emotion. Why in this specific one is it jealous of other people? I don't get that part. I mean, if you want to lean on the idea of being protective and reacting to her inner desires, totally get that. But jealousy, that felt off. But my central problem here is I feel like the golem is extremely powerful, and because of that, they had to really hold back on using its power until the very end. So in the middle, they had to kind of come up with a bunch of stuff, which to me seems like, well, they're going to focus on this relationship. And so it kind of drags that out until the very end when he finally kind of takes off and showcases what it can do. So just to sort of wrap this up a bit, the movie does have some good moments. The production value is solid, some really good blood effects, and the acting is very good. Although I do question the choice to make everybody speak English in this movie. I don't know. I think we've reached a point in movie culture where subtitles is okay. And to have Israeli actors in Lithuania in the 17th century speaking English to each other, I don't know, it just breaks the spell a little bit for me. But really my problem is just that it felt like the premise of the story was interesting and set up well, but then they kind of made the relationship between the woman and her golem the main focus, which would have been fine, but there just wasn't enough there to keep the plot moving along over the original idea of the threat to the village. I'd give this movie a C, but let me know what you think.